Hello everybody, I'm going to get started shortly, so last minute grab of a drink if you're going to reposition yourself out in the garden if it's a nice sunny day where you are, so forth. Now is the time to do that. If you're going to be joining along today, please do. We'll go at a reasonably slow pace. I'm going to be exploring some stuff along as well. You've still got plenty of time, so if you don't already have it, you can get the Neo4j desktop. So you can get that from neo4j.com/download. So you can get a copy of that, and I keep a copy of all of the code. I take notes, any models we create in this way, all of that good stuff. I also keep track of that on the address here on the slide. Actually, I'm going to put up any links and things that come up. I will put them up here as well. So if you want to get desktop, you can go to this. Oopsie daisy, didn't mean to do that. If you want to get a copy of Neo4j desktop, you can go here and you'll find an option to download it and get that installed. If you want to have a look at the repo, and I suggest you do, I will write up literally at the end of each session, so give me a few days. I will go away and I will write up everything, so I'll write up any questions that were coming up, I will write up any models we come up, any queries and that sort of thing. So all of that's going to be up there as well. So I've got a couple of moments to get that sorted and then we will get started. Okay, let's go. So, thank you very much for joining me again. So this is going to be week 2 of our graph adventures with wine. So this is going to be going on for quite a few weeks, and what we're going to be doing is we've got this wine data set that I found on Kaggle. And what we're doing is each week we're going to be building out slowly from that data. So the first few weeks, the kind of things we are doing is we're looking at that data and we're looking at how we might model that data, how we're going to bring that in, how do we go about refactoring the graph and all of that kind of thing. And then, as the weeks progress, we're going to start looking at really interesting things. So things such as, can we find some interesting patterns in our data? How are they connected? Can we do things like create recommendations and all of that good stuff? So this is going to keep going, and I'm feeling quite adventurous and thinking what might be really nice at the end of this is maybe we can even start to look at building some kind of application. So maybe we can build some kind of a wine recommender based on the kinds of things that you like. We can go away and send stuff back. So lots of options here. This is going to be a journey that's going to be carrying on for many, many weeks. And hopefully, we'll have a lot of fun out of it. As always, if you have any questions, let me know, drop them in the chat. I am keeping an eye on the chat channel, so if you've got any questions, any suggestions, keep them coming and I will incorporate them as we go through. So, what's the plan today? What am I thinking about? So on this nice sunny Saturday afternoon, what I was thinking we can do, we're going to look back. So what I did, for those of you who joined me in the previous session, we had some thinking around, what's the data model going to look like? And in the end what we did was we said, well, let's start off with a heavily reduced example, and that's going to allow us to load some data in, and we can still ask some interesting questions of this cut down data set. So I'm just going to quickly cover the code that I've put together in the repo, so that's going to load that data for us. And then I thought what would be good as well is I put some suggested questions in the write-up, and I thought let's have a look at those questions, and then after we've done that, let's have a look at extra data that we can bring in. So what we'll do is we'll refactor our model. We're going to add some more data into our into the database. So what we can do is we're going to adjust our data model. We're then going to import that data into the data model, and then we can ask some more questions. So let's see how that goes. So obviously we've got plenty of time, there's no rush, so we can step through this. And again, I encourage you, if you've got any questions, fire away. So hopefully this should be nice and fun. And as I said again, all of the stuff sits in the repo. So I'm just going to step over there now. As you can see, I've written everything up. So what I was quite keen for us to have a look at today. So obviously this was a version of the data model. This is not going to be the finished article. We're going to refine this a lot. But for those of you who joined me last week, we had a lot of questions coming out about this and we weren't sure how we were going to structure this. So we've kind of put that on pause for now because we want to bring some data in so we can start exploring it. And then we're going to revisit this and keep refactoring accordingly. So what we did in the end, we said, oh, okay, let's start with a cut down model for now, and hopefully it shouldn't be too controversial about how we've set it up and how we've connected things together. And we had this idea of we're going to have a winery, and the winery has a name, and that winery will belong to some kind of a province, and that province will be located in a certain country. So that's what we stopped at the end. And so the next part of this is getting that data loaded. So what I do here, so what I've done, I went away and wrote some things that we need to do to get that data in. So we're going to load the data in at the start of this session. So I'm going to create a brand new database. I'm going to copy and paste pretty much the things that are up documented up here. And we're going to get that data, and then we're going to look at answering some questions. So I talk here about the indexes we're going to create. So what we're going to do, because we are going to be using merges. So because we expect, obviously, we don't have multiple countries, we don't have multiple wineries and so forth. So we're going to be using the merge to effectively deal with repeats in our data, which we expect to see just due to the nature of what we're looking at and the fact it's in a CSV. And and after that so we're going to load some indexes that helps us speed up how quickly data is going to be added, and obviously for querying. And then I'm going to sort of talk through these two scripts, what's going on. So they're effectively loading the data for us. Something I wanted to flag here, and I do mention it in here, is some assumptions we're making, or certainly I'm making, and this is something we can revisit in future weeks, is I'm making the assumption that there is that every single winery name is unique. Now, I suspect this is very dangerous. Along with province, we're making the assumption here that every province we have is completely unique, and you don't have a province with the same name in different countries. That's okay for now, that's fine. Let's load some data in, and what we can do is in the future we can revisit that and have a look at how we're going to handle that. So we're probably going to do things like do a check against the country and that kind of thing. But for now we're just going to assume that everything that we have for winery, for province, and obviously certainly for country, everything we have, if we have one that's unique, it's not going to be the case that we have multiple provinces with the same name in different countries. So we'll cross that bridge when we come to it in the future. But for now, that's what's going on. So something to mention is, well, I'll show you shortly, but we're doing things here where we do multiple commands, and if you're doing this in Neo4j browser, you've got an option there to say you're going to execute many things at the same time. So let's get some data in to begin with. So I'm going to be using Neo4j desktop. I've already created a project name called data, so all I need to do at the moment is to put some data in there. So I'm going to first add a database. I'm going to add a local graph, and for reasons, and we will touch on using 4.0 in the future, because what I think would be really cool as we're building out the app, we can start to look at the more fine-grained security control. So maybe we want to create different user roles and say who's allowed to see what, but we'll leave that for another time, and I'm sticking with the 3.5x series for now, just because reasons. Nothing, it's just me being lazy. Okay, so I'm going to add password to my database, and I'm going to let it go away and create it. Something I'm going to mention as well, whilst that is loading, what I've done, so if you go to the repository, you'll see I've got some folders here, and I've got a folder here called data. So what you can do is you can go into there and you can download a copy. So you can pull the data from Kaggle if that's what you'd like to do, totally fine. What I've done is I've been doing some corrections. So for example, the YMAG data 130k v3, that one, so just sort of, as you can see, half an hour ago, what I did was I did a couple of fixes to that. So I tried to remove some more duplicates. So for those of you who joined last week, we saw that there was still some duplicates sitting in the data. So I did something very sort of quick and dirty. So I just went into Excel, and what I did was I went to have a look at wines that had the same this sort of review, the same wine name, etc., etc. So I basically said, you know, if they're the same, I tagged one of those and I got rid of it. So I've removed something just under 10,000 duplicate wines that were in there. So there may well be some more duplicates in there, but we've removed the big chunk of those. And the other thing as well, some of you may notice if you download the dataset from Kaggle that I spotted, is one of the columns that you have a reviewer's Twitter handle if they've got one, and there's some weird things going on there. So I've just gone through then clean that up. So I've done some tweaks to that, and I could as I go through that, maybe there's a few other bits and pieces we need to clean up. So just keep an eye on there. You'll see the versions as I update those. So I've already got a local copy of that, so I don't need to download that. But for those of you who are joining in along, you can grab a copy of the data there. So my database is there. I'm going to start my database. I'm going to give that a couple of moments. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go through setting various bits and pieces and importing that data. And I'll talk you through what's happening in the script as well. So we'll give that a moment. And whilst that is doing that, I'm just going to copy the indexes that I'm planning to set. So okay, so I want these indexes here, and my database is running, and I just hit open to bring up Neo4j browser. Okay, so as I mentioned a moment ago, what you can do, you can run more than one cipher statement in the query window, but what you need to do is you need to just set it, if it's not already set, to enable that. So we call it multi-line statement. So you do that by clicking on the cog, the browser settings, and then you'll notice you've got a checkbox here that says enable multi-statement query editor. So this is super useful if you're doing a bunch of commands, like let's say you've got a lot of import statements, or you're setting a load of indexes, or you're doing some kind of data cleanup. You're not returning anything to have a look at, but there's a bunch of things you want to run, so it's really handy for that, and I use that a lot. So I've got that set, so I'm now going to create my indexes. So you remember on our data model, so you've got here, remember we've got these three entities and they've got these node labels, and these are the items we're putting in there, and I'm creating indexes on these particular properties, and that is just because effectively when I'm adding data, I'm going to be using merge to bring in the data sets. It can do an index lookup rather than having to do a scan across the entire database, so it's like absolutely do that, it'll be a lot faster for everything. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to create those indexes. Excellent, so that's all done, and now let's have a look at the imports. So let's grab this and pop it into browser. So let's have a quick look at what's going on here in this query. So we're using periodic commit to load the data. So effectively what that means is that every whatever number we've specified, the database will go away and make those commit those changes to the database, and then it will continue, because otherwise what would happen is it'd go off and try to effectively do whatever we've specified every single line within that CSV, and you'd need a huge amount of memory potentially for that, and it's not an efficient way of doing it. It makes way more sense to just say, well, you know, every X number of rows, just go and commit it. Something to bear in mind, there's been a change recently in browser. So if you're going to use periodic commit and you're using it in the Neo4j browser, make sure you use this :auto, because otherwise it will complain. It doesn't like to, it won't allow you to run it without that. So just as a hint there. And so let's have a quick peek at what's going on. So what you'll notice is I've split out the loading of the data into two separate sections. So I've got my first pass where I'm going to be loading my nodes, and then I've got my second pass where I'm going to be loading the relationships. So I'm not doing it all in one pass, and the reason for that is it's this idea of eager queries. Basically, so the engine's trying to keep everything it can into memory, and it's not smart enough to go, right, I've connected these things, I can forget about that. So effectively, it wants to try and keep absolutely everything in memory. And if you sort of think about what we're trying to do, where we're connecting the relationships, or this, like, the periodic commit kind of doesn't matter anymore, because how do you know that something that you added, you know, sort of like 3,000 rows ago, you don't still need to be able to hook up the relationship? So it can get quite expensive. So what I'm doing is I'm splitting those two queries out, and I'm saying, well, first pass, I'm going to load all of my nodes, and then we can focus on whether they are, you know, is it a new node or is it something that already exists? And then after we've done that pass, in the second pass, what we're going to do is we're going to search for all of those nodes that we've created, and we're going to, you know, as a reference, because we'll be able to reference them again, and then we're going to connect relationships to them if it is applicable. So don't worry, we'll look at the relationship stage in a moment when we look at the next query. So what I wanted to do is to just have a quick dive into what's going on here. And for those of you in the previous session, you remember we talked about some of that data having nulls. So not every single field has got a value for country, for province, or for winery. So it means we're dealing with nulls. And there are a number of ways of how you can deal with nulls. And the approach that I've gone for, it's not going to win prizes for artistic merit, but it does the job. And what I do is there's this little trick where you can use a for each and a case when to effectively go away and check to see whether something is null. And the decision that we made in the previous session was what we were going to do. What we were going to do in the previous session was, if it doesn't have a country or a province or a winery, then we're just going to set a value of no winery, no province, no country. And then maybe we can do some interesting analytics against that later on in the session, you know. So later on in weeks we can have a look to see, because maybe there's some clever stuff that we can do where we can try and maybe predict what might be the winery. So maybe some wines, some wines have got a winery associated to a province and a country. Maybe the same winery is being mentioned where it's not being connected to a province but it's connected to a country, and so forth. So maybe there's something we can do to correct that in the future. So we're going to capture that information. And effectively what's going on here is it's a nice little trick, but basically we're saying, so wrapping up in this, so for each I we're doing a filter, and we're saying, so case when country is not null, so if there is a value for that, then brilliant, we want to set, so, you know, then I is going to be row.country, and you know, otherwise we're going to set it to sort of this value of no country. And for those of you who were here last week and saw this wasn't working, I forgot to put the end in. That's why the query wasn't behaving. So I put the end in there, and then this thing here, this is what we want to run as our command. And you can see here one of two things is going to happen. So either I is going to be set to whatever the value was for row.country, or I is going to be set to no country. And then like that, we're going to do our merge. So merge country, and then we're setting the country name. And we've got the same idea going on for province and winery. So that's what's going on. There will undoubtedly be a number of other ways we can handle the null. So maybe we can do things like using coalesce. Maybe we may decide actually we want to do some pre-processing and cleaning of that data beforehand. There will be a number of ways of doing it, and an approach that I've used is the one that, as you can see here. What I like about this approach is that I can set some kind of a default value, which is what I'm doing here. Because other options, what sometimes some people do is they'll just skip the row. So like if there is a null value for that, we skip a row. I don't want to skip a row because we don't know that one of those rows may have information for one of these entities, and it's still valid. We want to keep that, so that's why I don't want to skip anything. I want to keep all of those. So that's what's happening in the query. So let's get that running. I think it takes about 30 seconds or so. So